Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the moment of truth. The only thing colder than the weather is ice. See what I did there? Now, I gotta preface this by saying that this morning's briefing deals in part with immigration, and I also have to repeat that because we have to make sure the message is clear. One of the things that the tethers try to do is to tell the on-code black immigrants that, well, you guys, you might as well join with us. You're all lumped in together with us, right? When the reality is, they're not. Real recognizes real. What's going on here is bigger than just immigration or nationality. It's about the larger agenda of establishing black empowerment as an oppositional ideology to white supremacy. The tether is fighting that every step of the way. Black immigrants believe in fighting white supremacy. The tether believes in lying, scheming, lying, crawling on their bellies, lying, doing dirt, lying. I can freely acknowledge the reality that the tethers have done so much damage in the African and Caribbean countries that for a hell of a lot of otherwise hardcore black first immigrants, they literally have no one to build with. Under those circumstances, it makes sense to go to where you can find people who are on code and join with them. And the black immigrants who came here and did that cannot be lumped in with the duplicitous backstabbers who wrecked those countries and made them utterly dysfunctional. Marcus Garvey and a number of others fell into the category of an on-code immigrant who came here for honorable purposes. He couldn't get jack going when he was in Jamaica, so he left, and when he got here, he suddenly found that he had support. There was a receptive audience here for the message that Marcus Garvey was partaking in, but then he got deported, and when he got back to the Caribbean, the revolution died right then and there with him, and nothing happened there since. We owe it not just to ourselves, but also to the black immigrants who are on code to make it clear that the tethers and their endless backstabbing, their constant sucking up to white power, and always trying to run others into the ground for their own benefit, that's what put their home countries in the shape they're in. On-code immigrants make common cause with us. Tethers make common cause with white power, or anyone except for black Americans, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get away from blackness. And these pathetic attempts to rewrite history, to help white power erase us by lying and claiming that immigrants built America, when the only reason that they even came to the U.S. was because there was already a country that had been built by us. And we've had white power propping them up in the U.S. ever since. And now we're pushing back hard because we're not going to let them do here what they did in Africa and the Caribbean. Everyone should understand that reality and be on code with it. Now, the narrative that we've been seeing from the white media, at least its left half, is that Donald Trump's approval rating is tanking. And because they're the white media, they don't want you to have a chance to think about why that is. Instead, they're going to dictate to you what they want you to think.
So new polling shows President Trump's approval rating has fallen amid the growing unrest in Minnesota. The latest Reuters Ipsos poll finds just 38% of Americans approve of the job Trump is doing.
So right off the bat, they're trying to make an undeniable connection between Trump's approval rating and specifically the events in Minneapolis, because that's all that matters, right? Now, did they do that 5 years ago when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis and there were nationwide protests and riots that spread to other countries and continued up until the election? Is that what they said? Did they say, let's take a look at Donald Trump's approval rating? Oh, his approval rating is dropping and it's specifically because of the murder of George Floyd. He hasn't responded to. Of course, they couldn't pull that game. Mainly because George Floyd was not killed by federal authorities, he was killed by state authorities under the control of the Democrats. And you'll recall those same Democrats like Mayor Jacob Fry stood with the thugs in blue and stood against the citizens of Minneapolis. You didn't have the white media sitting there giving a day-by-day counter ticking down how much approval rating support that Jacob Fry had lost, did they? That's your first clue of the white media, as usual, is trying to conjure magic with this. And when you listen closer, you see that there's an asterisk beside their little criticism of Trump, basically making their point irrelevant.
Tying the lowest level of his current term.
Did you get that? Tying the lowest level of his current term. The lowest level of his current term. So that means that they're not even talking about his previous term. This is the lowest level of his second term, which is only a year old. So no matter how low they want to tell you Trump's approval rating is, it's not as if he hasn't been here before. So they're sitting here saying, well, Trump is back at 39% again. Yet they're reporting on it as if this is a brand new low, a record low for the orange man. This is the same thing the white media does with their print articles, too. They have headlines that say something like, Trump's approval rating falls amid Minnesota unrest. And 80% of the people won't even bother to read the article and see that it's been this low last year, too. So this is not some record low for him. At the most egregious, it's just the second time that he's been this low. And it's not new. When Trump retook office last year, the white media ran headlines saying that Trump has the lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years. Now, you look at how many qualifiers they had to put on that in order to make that headline. The lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years, which means they're curating this little statistic by limiting it to the president's first 100 days in office. That's 100 days out of 1,461 days of a 4-year term. But we're not looking at the full 1461. We're instead looking at the first 100, which is when the president always has the highest level of support. But in this case, they're not even comparing Donald Trump to other people's second term. They're taking Donald Trump's second term and treating that as if it's his first, when it's not. Oh, and do you know how low the Orange Man's approval rating was during this all-time lowest approval rating in the first 100 days in 80 years? 39%. The same 39% approval rating that Trump sits at today.
Approval of Trump's immigration policy has fallen to a new record low. 39% of Americans approve of the job Trump is doing on immigration, while 53% disapprove. And 58% said ICE agents have gone too far in their crackdown, while 26% said agents' efforts were about right.
Here they are saying that this ties a record low for his handling on immigration. Not even a record low for his approval rating, but a record low for his handling on immigration. Now, that's how you understand that the white media, at least the left corner of it, are trying to do their usual conjuring of magic by using buzzwords, certain phrases. Record low. We got to find a way to say that this is a record low for Trump. We got to say record low. That's what they're doing. They want to be able to say Trump's approval rating is at a record low. And if they can't say record low for his approval rating, they'll say, well, there's a policy that he has that has a record low. This is an appeal to emotion that's being made, not reason. And just to show how morally bankrupt this tactic is, to the extent that people are bothered by a couple of white protesters being killed in Minneapolis, there's no evidence that this is impacting people's opinion on the immigration raids themselves. But that's the kind of false comparison that we got the white left corner of the white media trying to make. As Dr. King said, white Americans in the 50s and 60s also gave these polling organizations the impression that they were in favor of civil rights because of how they opposed black demonstrators and citizens on the street being brutalized. But of course, as we all know, that wasn't true at all. These pollsters took two separate subjects, favoring civil rights and the brutality inflicted on black citizens, and treated them as one and the same. But Dr. King knew better than that. White citizens only objected to the openly violent measures that scum like Bull Connor were using. But those white citizens were not opposed to the reason that Bull Connor was doing it. In fact, they agreed with him. That's why during the civil rights movement, and in every poll since, when white people are asked whether they support the March on Washington all the way up to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, there has always historically been at least 70% of the population who vehemently opposes it. Anything that black people are fighting for always has at least 70% of the population saying we're against it, just on general principle. This has been the pattern from day one. White America can easily feel phony sympathy for people being brutalized by white thugs in the street, but at the same time, they wholeheartedly support and doggedly defend the very reasons that those white thugs are attacking black citizens. And what the white media is trying to claim as the country's opposition to the immigration raids actually works on the same principle. Immigration is really no different in that regard. The white leftist media is trying to conflate the immigration raids with people being killed. And of course, white America's attitude about this is the same as it was with black protesters in the 60s. They're in favor of the immigration raids, but they don't like seeing white people who look just like them being killed in the streets. That's the part that they actually object to. That's the reason why you don't see Donald Trump out there bowing, scraping, and begging for forgiveness, and you don't see any of his flunkies in front of the cameras either doing the same. They understand exactly what it is that they got support for, and why, if it seems like they're losing support, the real reason that it's happening. When you're somebody like Donald Trump, you're basically dealing in your own version of political realism. But you got to give the devil his due, like it or not. Donald Trump's conception of what constitutes political realism has proven to be a hell of a lot more accurate than the likes of MS Now. And I'm sure that more than a few of you have noticed that the protests regarding the killings of those white protesters in Minneapolis have not become this nationwide thing. You see, Donald Trump already understands that if that's the only opposition that he's facing, he can weather this storm. And the white media is also understanding that they don't have any black folks who are out there lending our unassailable moral heft to this particular issue. You don't see black folks lending our own moral legitimacy to that. And they need it if they're going to make a thing out of this. But we're staying out of it. You want to know why? Because this ain't our fight. Black people know better than to jump into something that has nothing to do with them. For the first time, at least in living memory, black folks are finally realizing that it's time for us to mind our own business. Everybody wants to be their own little faction. Everybody wants to be separated from us, so be it. And let them see what separated looks like. And this is going to be the new normal. It's not a matter of it's only until they say, oh, we're being hurt by the orange man's policies and oh, isn't this so wrong? And then we go, well, okay, how about a fig leaf? How about an olive branch? No. What's going to happen here is everybody's got to stand on their own. This will be the new normal, and it's long overdue. That's the reason why the white media is pointing out that Haitians in particular were celebrating that a court put on hold the end of their temporary protection status that Trump was going for. Because he was literally only days away from going into these Haitian enclaves and rounding them up. That's what he was planning to do. And he knows that that's the kind of thing that would give his base a sugar rush. The maggots always like that kind of thing. Seeing black folks getting pushed around, which is the same button that he pushed with the Somalians in Minneapolis. So yeah, Trump knows exactly who the hell it is that he's going after. But again, these are the exact same people who gave the orange man full carte blanche to do this, precisely because they wanted to separate themselves from being black. All of that stupid talk all these decades, at least going back to the 1950s and 60s. No, me no black. Well, you see, in my home country, everyone has dark skin, so we don't really think about black like that. We don't consider ourselves black. We don't consider ourselves black at all. And racism doesn't exist in our home country. Everyone's the same, so we can't really identify with you people now. Great. Well, in that case, then, when you got ICE showing up and other law enforcement agencies who are taking their part, I'm sure that nobody's going to be screaming that this is racial, right? I'm sure people are going to be saying, well, I don't even understand racism because I come from a country where we all look the same, so I don't really have a conception of racism, right? Is that what they've been saying? Or have they been saying, you wouldn't be doing this if we weren't black? Is that what they've been saying? Yeah, so they know the game that they've been playing the entire time. The only difference now is they're finally being shown it's not a game at all and never has been. But if it was a game, Donald Trump is definitely playing for keeps. And as far as his approval rating goes, Trump's not sweating that too much. He's not running for re-election, and it's going to be the next guy's problem anyway. And as for what's going on with the Haitians getting this temporary stay of execution, remember, things like this were precisely the reason that Donald Trump and the rest of the GOP were so gung-ho to stuff the Supreme Court full of Federalist Society flunkies. People who they know will rubber stamp precisely policies like this because that's why they were put on the bench. They weren't put on the bench to interpret the law. They were put on the bench to say that anything that this president in particular wants to do is legal because, well, reasons. But just understand that the attempts to try to handicap the 2026 midterms are well underway at this point, and trying to establish that immigration is going to be the wedge issue, the issue that the election hinges upon the outcome of who controls the House and Senate, I don't think that's going to be the case at all. Americans, by and large, especially for the big elections, they tend to vote based on pocketbook issues. And right now, the economy ain't doing so great, largely because Trump has not done anything to substantively address the cost of living crisis, which everybody knows is, by and large, the housing crisis. What's occurred is the investor class, these institutional investors like BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, and a hell of a lot of others, they're engaged in what amounts to real estate hoarding. They are hoarding the housing market, and they've caused a massive distortion in it. But because of the fact that these are the people who actually fund both political parties, neither one is actually talking about stopping these guys. They know exactly what the issue is and exactly what the answer is. But, as a wise man once said, it's impossible to get someone to understand something when their salary, or rather political donations, depends on them not understanding it. And this goes triple for Donald Trump. So Trump has already said that he's going to be appealing this decision regarding the temporary protection status to the Supreme Court, his Supreme Court, because he chose most of them. And the judge who handed down her ruling on that, her ruling sounded more like an editorial than it did an actual judge's ruling. And that'll probably come into consideration too. But the point is, regardless, this thing's most likely going to get overturned by Donald Trump's Supreme Court. And then he's going to be making a big deal, just like he did in Minneapolis, of rounding up as many dark-skinned people as possible. I say dark-skinned because they don't consider themselves to be black, so why would I insult them by calling them black? So that being the case, the deplorables will get their jollies seeing what they feel to be, well, here's some Negroes who are getting what for, and Donald Trump can go ahead and make sure he solidifies his support with them. That's the main thing that he's trying to do. He's trying to keep those home fires burning. But the reality is you have the left corner of the white media trying to manufacture the misimpression that immigration is some sort of third rail of American politics now, when the reality happens to be it's the images of white people being harmed in the course of these immigration raids that's the real third rail, the only third rail there's ever been, which is white social discontent. As I've already mentioned to you before, even the New York Times had to admit that when it comes to Democrats' chances to actually get back the House and the Senate, they're in the low single digits. That's how far ahead they are, the GOP, on this one. Not double digits, not even the high single digits, the low single digits. Donald Trump's problem is that the housing crisis is one of the main factors that's dragging him down. That's the reason why he's trying to get a new Fed chairman in there, somebody who will rubber stamp his policy of lowering interest rates. I guess nobody explained to him that the interest rates happen to add insult to injury, but the actual injury are the housing prices themselves. That's what's actually hurting. Unless somebody addresses that, you're not addressing anything. But then again, the big institutional investors, as far as they're concerned, this happens to be their nest egg. This is how they intend to get their windfall. This is supposed to be the big payoff for them. You start putting policies in place that drive down housing costs. Why? You've hurt the value of their investment. And that's the real problem that the orange man is facing going into the midterms. At the end of the day, people are going to be asking themselves, economically, do I feel better about the price of groceries, gasoline, and whether or not I can get myself an affordable home? If they don't feel good about all three of those things, then they're going to say, you know what, anything will be better than this. That's the real threat to Trump. Naturally, the orange man is engaged in his own form of magical thinking. He doesn't have the ability to actually demand that housing prices be lower because the big donors that he depends on, they don't like that. And at the same time, he's also saying that we need to get more people into homes. So he's trying to have it both ways, but the odds are that unless there's a major economic turnaround no later than the summer, then yeah, the Democrats are going to wind up at least getting one House of Congress back. But make no mistake, no matter what the white media may try to tell you, immigration is not some big, huge issue that the election's going to hinge on. The very people who you see getting rounded up, a hell of a lot of them were the ones who supported Trump. So they already knew what the hell they were getting, even if they didn't believe that they were the ones who would be getting it. And as for all of this breathless coverage that the white media gives, constantly obsessing over Trump's approval ratings, just remember, these are the same people who said on two separate occasions there was no way in hell that he was going to be able to win the presidential election, and the orange man managed to defy gravity both times. The reason that they do all of that endless kvetching about opinion polls is because these white media companies are largely involved in them. For them, this is a gut check about how much influence they feel they still have, not just with the electorate, but also with the people who they're reporting on. That's who the real audience is for these opinion polls. And if the orange man isn't quaking in his boots about every opinion poll that gets a headline, there's probably a good reason for that. Remember, family, Lyndon Johnson also tried to run his administration according to opinion polls, and that didn't work either. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: David Williams, Mark Brown, John Harvin, L. Ransom, and Yolanda Stallings. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.